Hey everybody, this is The Thoughtful Husband, and today I'm going to talk about, I'm going to answer a question. Are women more emotional than men? Well, first things we should ask is, what are emotions? I know that sounds like a pretty basic question, and maybe you know, but I think it'd be helpful to define exactly what they are. Well, what we know from emotions are, it's like they're chemical messengers. You probably heard of them. You know, they're influenced by things like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, testosterone, estrogen, acetylcholine, all kinds of different chemicals that are going inside of your body. And here's a fun fact. I don't know if you know this, but the brain is not actually something that feels. It's why when doctors do brain surgery on a human being, they can anesthetize the skull, leave the brain just fine, do brain surgery right there, brain doesn't feel it. No nerve endings in the brain. What's interesting is that even though the brain is the one that produces and sends the chemical messengers we call emotion, tends to happen inside the body. It's our dashboard. It's our body's way of communicating, like a dashboard, like the dashboard of a car. Emotions are our body's way of communicating to us, both to perceive what's outside of us and also what's inside of us. It's a way that our brain sends messages to us and communicates to us to tell us what's going on and what we should be paying attention to. It's a lot like the dashboard of a car. You know, I'm talking about speedometer, the check engine light, what's the inside and outside temperature, should I check the oil, is there enough gas, you know? Can you imagine, for instance, driving without a dashboard? Like, does the gas pedal work? Yes. Can you get going to where you're needing to go? Sure. Do you know how fast you're going? Do you know when you're going to run out of gas? Do you know if your car's functioning all right? No. It's actually what I think crazy feels like. I think crazy feels like driving a car without a dashboard. It's a lot like that. That's what human beings feel like, and that's what I call crazy. Because crazy is, I think, the feeling of just not being able to trust your own self, not being able to trust your own emotions, not being able to understand what's going on inside of you and what you should do next. It's an aimless feeling. It's a chaotic feeling, that feeling of crazy. So emotions are a lot like our like the dashboard of a car. Here's another one. Emotions are also like kids. I like to think of them like kids. Like lots of little kids, disorganized, primitive, kind of needy, fearful, kind of stupid sometimes. But they come to us and they tell us something like, hey, this hurts. Hey, I don't like this, right? If you've ever had any kids, you know this. Like, they're not great communicators. They throw temper tantrums. They flip out. They get sad. They don't know what it is that they're feeling. They're just kind of acting it out. And that's because I think that they're very instinctual. They still have these same emotions that we do. They just don't have the ability to process and slow it down, and the maturity and the prefrontal cortex to handle all that stuff. Finally, I think it's important to notice that emotions are part of a system. Emotions are part of the brain-body environment system, meaning our brain is perceiving things at all times and all places. It's also getting information from the body and mobilizing the body, and those two things are in relationship to the environment. It's why you can feel an emotion and then act on the emotion, and there's a change in the environment, and that change in the environment then could provoke a different emotion, right? It's just, they're always in continual loop. The emotions telling you what to do, or at least informing you what you could do and what to pay attention to, but they're dumb. They're very dumb. They don't tell you exactly what to do all the time. They're not, I like to say they're not right, but they're always helpful. You always have to pay attention to them. Well, let's answer this question. Are women more emotional than men? Well, let's further answer this other question, right? What do we mean? Which emotions are we talking about? Has anyone ever said, man, women are just way too happy? Like, look, they just need to put a lid on it. These women are just way too emotional. There's just too much joy going on, too much happiness, too much peace. Man, laughter? Man, these ladies, they're just laughing all the time. I don't think that's the case. Normally when people are saying women are too emotional, they're talking about the negative emotions. Well, because one of the things that we know about women are different than men in a few different ways. Of course, they're mostly the same, right? But they're different in three distinct ways. First one is women tend to be more interested in people than things. Second thing is that women tend to be more agreeable, meaning they're more likely to say yes or more likely to not say no. They're more likely to be polite, to not be assertive, put other people's needs above their own. Women tend to be more neurotic, meaning they have the personality trait called neuroticism. Neuroticism, I know it sounds bad, but it's basically sensitivity to a negative emotion. So it's the brain's way of saying, this amount of bad things happen, how much internal pain and disturbance does that cause? The more neurotic you are, the more neuroticism you have in your personality, the more pain you're going to feel for the same thing happening to somebody else. And women have more neuroticism. Well, so when we talk about women being more emotional, I think we have to consider those three factors and why they might exist. And frankly, I think the answer is probably a bit obvious. I find that things like being interested in people, being agreeable, and being neurotic are really good for raising young children, right? We have somebody who's interested in people, not going to go out and just do whatever kind of things. Very interested in little human beings. Very agreeable, meaning able to put somebody else's needs above your own. Very good for raising children. And also neurotic. I have a sensitivity to negative emotion. My brain's constantly scanning. My brain is constantly scanning every little thing and to see what might go wrong, because how important is it to predict whether or not a child's going to get hurt, and to have the ability to perceive where it is and what it's doing and what it could do at all moments, at all times. I think those three personality factors are very helpful for raising young children. In addition, I think estrogen likely plays a role. Estrogen seems to increase the perception of vulnerability, especially when you notice some ladies who are on birth control. A lot of times they really struggle with their own perception of their own vulnerability. It can be even overwhelming at times, just perceiving how vulnerable they are and the fear that it leads to. And I think that's largely due to estrogen. One thing I can say for sure is men don't seem to struggle nearly the same that women do in this area. I think that's largely due to the lack of estrogen, the lack of progesterone, and yes, the presence of testosterone in their system. Because testosterone seems to narrow the focal view, and so you can only focus on one thing at a time. And also, testosterone seems to be able to push through, by using anger and determination, push through anxiety, be able to do single-minded tasks more efficiently, and also take greater risks without consideration of your own life. And so we might ask, why do men have testosterone? Well, I think it makes sense if we think about our ancestors, how they used to hunt and gather and build buildings and do hard labor and do field work, a lot of manual physical labor, risky, dangerous work. In order to do that effectively, can you really be thinking about the family at home? Can you value your life too much to not put yourself at risk? I don't think so. I think it's very adaptive for males to have a chemical like testosterone that pushes them to the limit and makes them do hard things, makes them overcome and take risks for the benefit of all. So are women more emotional? Well, I would argue that that's probably not the best word. I think that women are not necessarily more emotional. I think that they are more aware of their vulnerabilities. And I think that they are more perceptive of themselves and others, and that they depend on their environment for protection. Now, I've worked with many women. I have many women in my life. One of the common things that I notice is they perceive a threat, and then it's like they either can't protect themselves or take steps to protect themselves, or they won't do it. I don't know if they can't or they won't, but they don't. They don't often. They don't get concealed carry licenses. They don't get bear spray or some other kind of home defense. They don't take steps to defend themselves by martial arts or some other way. It's almost like they just feel helpless. They just feel vulnerable, but then yet they don't seem to have the ability to mount a defense. Instead, they seem to rely on their environment, the police officers, the government, their husband, their father, walls and locks and other various things. But they themselves, if all of those things get thwarted, what are they going to do? They don't know. It's almost as if they don't even have an answer for what to do if that happens. They feel defenseless. They feel powerless. And if you can imagine being in that situation and not doing much about it, the perception of your own vulnerability, and yet not the perception of your own power, your own ability to overcome that vulnerability and defend yourself, yeah, you're going to see a lot of emotions, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic, And these anxious feelings, even things like jealousy and envy sometimes in a romantic relationship, these usually are the emotions that people are talking about when they say that women are more emotional than men. I also have a healthy respect for this because, as far as I can tell, women can't shut it off. They're not able to just shut that part of themselves off that cares, that thinks about their children, that thinks about what their husband's doing or not doing. Seems like I almost imagine when I think about women, I almost imagine them as like little tendrils coming from their brain and just connecting to all parts of the house, all different people, and they just think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it. Women have, since there's been women, since there's been human beings, they've been almost like households in and of themselves, and they have the capacity to create households. It's why we often regard them as more valuable than men, less disposable, because they take care of everything, and they do so not necessarily out of the goodness of their hearts, but because they're propelled to by their own nature. Their own anxiety sort of makes them feel the pain of others, attend to the needs of their children, notice where their husband is and where he isn't, and it's very uncomfortable for them. But I think, and I would recommend any guys that are listening to this, that they honor that they find a way to honor it as something that's not a choice or a deficiency of the female kind, but as something that is biological adaptation that's gotten us where we've gotten so far. So that's what I would say if somebody asked me, are women more emotional than men? I would say, no, not quite. I think they're more vulnerable, and I think they often lack the ability to perceive their own strength, their own power. And as a result, I do think that they often spend a lot of time testing their environment, testing how trustworthy the people are around them, testing the locks, testing the garage doors, testing the system, testing the government, testing everything that makes them safe, because they themselves don't believe that they themselves make themselves safe, like men do. By the way, you can even see this in female relationships. Female relationships often operate under the ethic of I protect you, you protect me. Whereas male relationships are more like I protect me, you protect you. Like we're on our own, we're kind of doing this together, but I'm not going to do things for you that you should be doing for you. I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to think about it. It's not even a thought. It's not a choice. So what should we do about this? I think the first thing is we really should consider that the emotionality, the so-called emotionality, the vulnerability of women is a biological adaptation. It's not a flaw, it's not a deficiency, and it's not a choice. It's something that's in them that, frankly, if it didn't exist, they probably wouldn't be as good mothers, right? And it is a burden. We need to honor that. I think it's a burden for ladies. They're not happy. It does take away a lot of their happiness. So they're not very happy about it. Us men, like, we can sit on the couch and just not think. We can zone out, watch a football game, play a video game, read a book, and not have that constant pinging of, I wonder what's going on over here. I wonder what this person's doing, right? And I know we enjoy that, and I certainly get a sense that females are a little bit jealous of that. But hey, it's not a choice, and it's certainly not a moral superiority that we're able to do that. So I think it's just a function of testosterone. We should also acknowledge that not having negative emotion isn't always better, right? I think it's one of the reasons why men die sooner. Is men, we tend to avoid health problems. We tend to avoid pains. We just kind of push it down. And so avoidance is, like most of the time that men fail, it's because they're avoiding something. And usually that thing is associated to something they probably should have picked up on because their emotions were telling them to pick up on it, and they didn't. They weren't listening to their body. They weren't listening to their heart, their mind, their soul. They just went to work, and then they zoned out or distracted themselves. I think it's a large factor why men die sooner. Also, stress, anxiety, that gives ample motivation. Gosh, all those single moms out there that are just doing it, it's not like they're just awesome, amazing people that are morally superior to everybody else. No. They are biologically determined to prioritize the health and the wellness of their family and their children over their own. And they will, through stress and anxiety and pressure, they will make this thing succeed. They will, just like a pressure grinder, they will make it work. The family is too important for it to fail. And whereas guys sometimes can just disengage and just not care, it's very, very uncommon to see a woman who abandons her children, for instance, unless there's some severe drug use at play. Third thing is, I would say, and this is more for you men, I think you should honor your wife's anxiety, honor her fear. Right? Don't give in to it. Don't let it control the household. That's certainly not the case. But you do have to pay attention to it. Let me ask you, what happens if she perceives a danger, she perceives something that's just not right, and she comes and tells you about it, and you say, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. Let me ask, has that ever worked? Has that ever worked? No, it's never worked. Why? Because you're asking her to ignore her internal guidance system. And if she does, that's what's going to make her feel crazy. What she needs from you in that moment is not for you to just go, okay, and she doesn't need you to just agree. She needs you to listen and then maybe do something. Like talk her through this thing. Hey, baby, what are you feeling? What do you think is going on? Let's see about this thing, right? Pay attention. Maybe display some leadership if you have to. But for the love of God, don't dismiss her. Don't tell her to shut up. Don't tell her, get over it. Don't minimize or dismiss any of that stuff. Frankly, it doesn't work, and that's good enough a reason not to do it in the first place, right? Fourth and the fifth is for you ladies out there. What do you do about the negative emotion? Well, I would say firstly, I think you should acknowledge your own vulnerability. You can't run away from it. You can't prevent every little bad thing from happening. Really, the best thing you can do is prepare yourself for if it happens. A lot of when people get stuck in anxiety is they think that they need to prevent, and frankly, they aren't capable of doing that. Go ahead and try to prevent the next 100 bad things from happening, and the 101st will get you, right? Why? Because you're human. You're human. You're going to get hurt, and actually trying not to get hurt will hurt more. And I hate to say that because it sounds a little, I don't know, maybe a little cavalier, maybe a little male of me. But this is one of the things where I think ladies can really listen to the guys. Take a risk. You're not that vulnerable. Adapt. Choose. Finally, for the ladies out there, I will say that overcoming vulnerability is one of the hardest things for any lady to do. At least that's what it seems to be for me. And I would recommend that every single lady out there learn to be assertive and learn to be formidable. Learn to understand how dangerous and powerful you are. And really dispense of this, what I would call it nonsense, where we're just trying to make the world safer. There's no such thing as the world being safe enough for you to feel safe. I don't think that's going to exist. I don't think the government's going to get its act together. I don't think men are going to finally shape up and, be what they can be all the time. I don't think people are going to stop committing crimes. I don't think that's ever going to happen. So what are you going to do while you're waiting for it to happen? Are you just going to try to make the world safer? No. I say instead of making the world safer, make yourself more dangerous. Make yourself more formidable, more assertive. That's your best kit. That's your best case. You're not going to find all the thousands of narcissists. They don't wear name tags. You're not going to find all the abusers, right? They're pretty charming up front. You're not going to find all the people that would harm you, lie to you. You're never going to find all those people. What you can do is be narcissist-proof as best you can. You can be wise and discerning. You can be assertive. And then when something bad happens, do something about it. Don't just tolerate it. Right? That's what you can do. Right? How many times have you seen a lady who seems like she's just stuck in this bad situation, and what she does is she vents. She just talks and talks and talks. She has the same conversation with 4 or 5 of her female friends. Right? Fine. I understand how that could be helpful, right? But if that doesn't lead towards a solution, your venting isn't producing something. Venting isn't doing something. It's actually just keeping you in that difficult situation of powerlessness. And the longer you stay there, the worse you're going to feel. And your body, your emotions, they'll tell you. One of my favorite quotes is from a guy named Eckhart Tolle. And he says, "When you complain, you make yourself out to be a victim. Accept the situation, change the situation, or leave the situation. Everything else is madness." And I leave you with that. You have to choose. There's definitely a risk in doing nothing. There's definitely a risk in not acting. Just like there's a risk in acting. So, are women more emotional than men? Possibly. They're more vulnerable, and they know it. And I would ask every lady out there to pay attention to that and do something. This is The Thoughtful Husband. I hope I've been helpful to you today. Take care. My world.